And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Strafford, Dave Lockwood along with you on this Monday morning. We're here to talk about two-game spring training slate. No, I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding. We're here to talk about an 11
They're really running those, aren't they?
They are. They are.
So how do they not have AAF yet?
Well, that's so. I asked the same question. I got an interesting reply via direct message. Not that it was in any way a source, right? It was just somebody replying via direct message. That their theory was that the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world didn't want to upset the NFL by
really
making the AAF.
That's hilarious if true, because it's not like it would take a single dime out of their pockets. You know,
but it just was.
I think it's probably because they launched CFL and it was a colossal bust.
Could be, yeah. And to be honest, you maybe from the viability of football and DFS, you like to see it because they're not chasing after every new thing, right? That it's not out there as we have to get it up just to get some extra cash flow in. But spring training, and listen, there have been plenty of people who have said for years, why isn't there spring training DFS when there's preseason NFL and preseason NBA, and why doesn't this happen? Spring training is a different beast, though.
Way different.
I said on Twitter, whoever claims to, no, I said it in Slack chat, whoever claims to be a spring training tout and have an understanding of how this is actually going to shake out should have their head examined. So,
yeah. I have no, like, if I play it, it'll be purely as a hobby, right. Like purely for fun.
Yeah.
And because it'll make watching spring training slightly more enjoyable.
Right.
You know, because it's generally
you'll get to watch Harper in spring training soon anyway. So,
you think he's coming to the Phillies?
I do.
I'll buy it when I'll
sure.
believe it when I see it.
I think it's I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, but that is my conclusion. I don't think he goes to San Francisco. And the fantasy show I co-host on Saturday mornings, co-host Mike made a good point that when you're a Boris agent or a Boris client, you don't really get to choose what city you go to. Like Scott Boras is going to push you wherever the most money is. And that's something you realize when you're signing with him, that's going to be your life, that you may not get to choose to go play in, New York or Boston or
you're getting the most money.
Exactly. Yeah. You're going to get the most cash. So I think Philly still has the quote unquote stupid cash, as their owner said in the offseason.
Right. Going to spend stupid cash. Would you rather have Nolan Arenado or Bryce Harper? I'd rather have Arenado, I think.
I think so. I think, I think Harper still has a potential to be a generational talent behind Mike Trout. But Arenado, I think Arenado's numbers outside of Coors are good enough that I think he is in especially in Philadelphia. I mean, if we're talking Philly specifically.
Yeah. It's not Coors, but it's
good.
Still decent enough. And he's still a really, really good player. Not to mention
defense. I mean,
the best. I think you could argue he's the best defender in the entire league. Right. I mean, easily the best at the hot corner. Like, no question. No question at all.
I agree with that. So let's we'll dive in. 11-game NBA slate. There are some injuries across the NBA that need to be taken into consideration. You have Giannis doubtful. You have James Harden questionable at last I saw with this neck issue. Wouldn't be surprised if Houston sits him down again. Karl-Anthony Towns has been in the concussion protocol after a minor car accident last week. You have Joel Embiid already out. Doncic is injured with a Q-tag here, dealing with his ankle injury. What are anybody I missed at the top? Any ones that you're most interested by injury-wise on this 11-game slate?
I mean, you have to keep looking at Myles Turner here, right? His absence has served us really well recently, and we'll see. But dealing with a hip injury, and Turner generally, when he's questionable, usually plays. So just seeing that he's been out makes things pretty interesting. Is O'Quinn at 4,300 still worth it? I think you can still get there. I mean, it's not as beautiful as it was before, but Sabonis at that price, yeah, sure. But the funny thing is, like, he's not Sabonis. 28, 27 minutes the last two games. You can't go in expecting 33 minutes from him, but 28 minutes from Sabonis is still good enough, given he's like a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy. So we'll be paying close attention to that. We also have the Spurs on the second of a back-to-back. We saw that Derek White was sitting out Sunday's game to play Monday. We'll see if anyone gets rested here. I think that's definitely worth paying attention to in Brooklyn. Could make things very interesting, especially with LMA playing with that illness. He played terribly against Toronto after playing with that illness, and then last night or Sunday, depending on when you're listening, so it'll be today, he 4 early fouls, ended up playing like 21 minutes because he was in early foul trouble, so that sucked. Miami's an interesting one too, because two of these aren't exactly marquee names on their own team even. James Johnson, Rodney Magruder, both doubtful. Justice Winslow also doubtful to play. So that's going to free up some minutes for sure. TJ Warren is out as well, which this game for the Miami Heat comes against Phoenix. Quite nice, eh? Anthony Davis, probable here. Are they playing consecutive back-to-backs? Or wait, you know what? Davis did they have a back-to-back, or did he just sit out?
He sat.
On the next, but it wasn't a back-to-back.
No,
was
it was a back-to-back. Yeah, it was.
You sure? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
It what? Do they have consecutive back-to-backs?
It could be.
Let me make sure. It's kind of important here. Let's see. No, they don't. Okay. I saw something that said they did. So Monday and Wednesday. Nope. Okay. Just curious. Taurean Prince is out. The Harden news, as you mentioned, is pretty big. We'll pay close attention to that, especially given that, somebody like Chris Paul, 8,300 on DraftKings against Atlanta. Are you kidding me? That's a $9,400 play right there if Paul is out or if Harden is out. Really, I'd have no problem getting there at all. Also, the Giannis news. Did you mention that? I'm assuming you did.
I did quickly passed over it, but
yeah,
elaborate, please.
Pretty big against Chicago, given that he's not expected to play here with that knee soreness. So that's going to free up a whole lot. And I think it'll also be really interesting, Dan, to see how or if Mirotic is featured here. Right now, you have Mirotic that can come in and soak up those minutes at the 4 and maybe some at the 5, but he's only played 14 and 18 minutes in his 2 games. We know that he was limited there. So that's interesting. Otto Porter questionable, Kevin Huerter questionable. Towns is expected to be back in action. And I think that is Luka. Luka Doncic remains questionable. So does Maxi Kleber. So we've got a lot of big pieces of news we'll have to pay close attention to.
And to do that, you can stay close to Awesemo.com by using the promo code EARLYBIRD, and that's one word, and gets you 50% off your first month at Awesemo.com. Then you can get into Slack chat where not only Dave and Adam and Emac and Josh and Spags and the crew keep you up to date, but the subs also do a great job of sharing news throughout the day. There in Slack chat, you also get projections and the lineup builder, and you get access to the articles, which Dave will be writing on Monday, the deep dive. Then you have NBA strategy show in the morning. You have the deep dive at 5 p.m. I should make that the deeper dive, I should say. And then after that is Live Before Lock with Ed Fear and either Spags or Josh, depending on what night it is. So tomorrow you get Adam and Josh on the NBA strategy show. So stay tuned for that on our YouTube channel at Awesemo.com. So diving in here, and trying to go position by position will obviously take into consideration some of these higher priced stars who are out when talking about each of the positions, to be honest, because that's how lineup construction comes together. But when we look at Harden at 11-4 against Atlanta, I don't see how Houston plays him here. It's a home game. It's against Atlanta. You let him rest one more game.
I agree completely.
So let's leave him to the side for now. We can always talk about him sort of in the context at the end of if he plays. But you get Steph Curry at 9-3 against Charlotte. Lillard at 9-2 gets Cleveland on the road. Kemba against Golden State on the other side of that Steph Curry matchup. You get Booker at 8,600 against Miami. D'Angelo Russell against San Antonio, who's on a back-to-back after losing to the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden.
Incredible, huh?
You can't do that. You can't do that if you want to.
I really like Mitchell Robinson, man. I know I've been talking about him a lot now, but with DeAndre Jordan out and potentially having him sit him out or maybe buy him out, Mitchell Robinson was a second-round pick. And you're a Knicks fan. I really like this kid. I mean, his shot blocking acumen is insane. Solid rebounder, throws down some filthy dunks. Obviously not a shooter, but man, you might not need it. I like what this kid has to offer.
Yep, he has the pieces, and he is that sort of athletic five that doesn't need the ball in his hands. That is for damn sure. I'm sure I might be making this up, but I'm pretty sure there's a stat out there of touches, right? But touch or time per touch. I think it's time per touch is.
So there's touches and there's time. Yes, there's possession. Yeah,
right. I'm pretty sure his is like the lowest it can be.
Like, so is it Robinson, you're saying?
Yeah, like it's because he's either getting an alley-oop or passing the ball. Like those right. are his two.
Yeah, or rebounding. Yeah, and dishing it off super quick. I can tell you right now, actually, Mitchell Robinson, he's averaging, by the way, like 1.32 fantasy points per minute over the last 30 days. Some really solid numbers from him. I'm very impressed. Time of possession for Mitchell Robinson is, let's see here. It is, where are you, Mitch? Oh, my God. 0.4 seconds. Right. To give you an example, Dennis Smith is 6.4. Moutier is 4.9. Granted, they're guards, but still.
Right.
That's crazy. Enes Kanter 1.6. Vonleh 1.6. Knox 1.5.
He's less than half a second.
Whew. That's crazy.
It's impressive.
He does a lot of other great stuff out there.
So what do you got here at the top end of point guard? What matchups stand out, and who do you think will be in the player pool when you start to write the deep dive on Monday?
Well, I think you make a good point. And look, if Harden does play, then we all, it's not a big deal. Like the good thing about the Harden situation is you kind of know what to do with if he does or doesn't play. If he doesn't play, man, it is windy outside. If he doesn't play, Chris Paul is a unbelievably strong play against Atlanta at home. Yeah, sure, this game should be quite a blowout regardless, but who cares? Like, you can't predict that, right? And I'm not going to bother. And if it is, my assumption is that Chris Paul will have a large hand in that. Not to mention, the Houston Rockets, I think people assume that because this team takes a lot of threes and such, that they play at a fast pace. I mean, they really do not at all. Even since the start of the new year, they're playing at like the 16th fastest pace, which is way up from what they were playing earlier in the year. But it's still a big pace up spot for them. And there's really nothing not to like about Chris Paul here. 8,300, I still have zero issue with whatsoever, and I'll be getting to him for sure. Ben Simmons is an interesting one for me because he's definitely suffered from Tobias Harris being in Philly, way more than the effect that Jimmy Butler had on him, no question. However, against the Pelicans team, I really like him. And he's not that expensive. We know that Embiid is out. I mean, I think Simmons is a perfectly strong play here. I still expect to see rebounding. And, look, he's a great passer. He can rack up steals, maybe block a shot or two. And I expect him to be more aggressive. In these two games that Embiid has missed, he's attempted 36 field goals. So, averaging 18 per game. That's encouraging. 15 free throw attempts as well. So the usage has been through the roof. So, yes, I'm okay saying, you know what? I'd love to see him rebounding more. I'd love to see him rebounding like he was prior to Tobias Harris coming to Philly. But it doesn't matter as much when you're talking about wild usage and usage that you're not really used to seeing from Ben Simmons. At 8K, and what's he at on FanDuel? Let me pull it up. Ben Simmons on FanDuel is – why is that not on there? Hold on a second.
I'm logging in. I'll see what I see.
Hold on. I pulled it up. 1, 2, 3. What do they have? Not. Oh, you know what?
Are you in small forward?
No, I had a slate pulled up from the other day.
Oh, nice.
I thought I pulled it up, but apparently I did not. So Ben
9K.
Simmons on, 9K, and that's still pretty reasonable. In those 2 games that Embiid has missed, Simmons has a 29.5% usage rate, leads the team 6% higher than the next closest player. I really do like that a lot. So throw him into the mix. D'Angelo Russell's another one, Dan, and I'm assuming because he's priced up a bit that he could go overlooked here, but the Spurs defensively have not been good lately at all. And it's been a rough go for them recently. Just look over the last month where they rank in defensive rating, dead last in basketball, dead last. But they're also playing at the 14th fastest pace, so they're playing a little bit quicker. You saw what happened against the Knicks last night. Now they got their second of a back-to-back. You could see more players rest. Yeah, I like Russell here too. I mean, the position is going to give us plenty of quality options. It just depends where you want to pay up. And I think those will be the ones that I want to pay for most. Over Lillard, I think Doncic, if he plays against the Clippers, is very interesting. But we still have to wait and see whether or not he's active. And then you come down a little bit lower. Jeff Teague, I had no problem with him even if Towns was active the other day.
Yep.
But I think Teague. By the way, I'm not sure. I didn't catch any of this game. Do we know why he only played 19 minutes and had such a dismal game last time out? I didn't pay attention to that game.
I think it was a blowout from the start. I just think it was a rotation thing where they weren't playing well, but I can double check if there's any other news.
I mean, I know Rose played really well, so that could have a lot to do with it. But he only played 23 minutes. He had a really good game, but only played 20. I guess it's not important. Teague's, fine for value here. That's a little bit concerning though with Towns coming back, but what are you going to do? I think you're probably better off going to Eric Bledsoe here with Giannis doubtful to play. Bledsoe with Giannis off the floor has posted strong numbers. You get 30, 32 minutes from him, you're going to be pretty happy. Against Chicago, yeah, it's not great, but at the same time, having one of the best players in the world off the court should make it so Chicago can at least stay remotely competitive for some period of time. I think you can throw Malcolm Brogdon into the mix as well. Dwayne Wade is always a quality tournament option. We can talk about him as well. You don't need to talk about him as shooting guard, but when he's playing well, he will get minutes. Like against Philly, he played 31 minutes, had a strong game. I don't have a problem with him. I liked it when he was a little bit cheaper, but what are you going to do? And then I wanted to ask you about this guy before we move on. What are your thoughts right now on Elfrid Payton, now that Anthony Davis, even when he does play, is getting fewer minutes, Drew Holiday playing fewer minutes, and Elfrid Payton last game, along with Julius Randle, both played big minutes, and Holiday still played 33, but I'd expect to see a few less here. They got to match up with the Sixers in New Orleans.
Yeah, I like Elfrid Payton a lot. It was intriguing to see Julius Randle jump back up to 38 minutes. He had just 25.
Yeah, I expected it. Not 38, but I expected him to get around 34, 35 because there hasn't been any talk about him being limited.
Yep, it was just one of those. It felt like they might be shutting everything down there.
Yeah, it's possible for sure.
But I'm a big fan of Payton as just a usage guy when Holiday plays 22 to 24, and that's what I think the number is going to be going forward. Yeah, you might get some games where it's 28 to 29. Maybe there's one or two where he pushes over 30, but Holiday and Davis are going to be pretty steady between 22 and 25 minutes at most, and Payton's going to pick up the slack. Payton's going to take shots, and the price point definitely helps here for Payton on DK at sub 5K. I did want to point out one other name here, and it's coming off a good game, so a little bit of box score watching for me. But if Doncic is out, and that is a big if, can you go to a guy like a Trey Burke and just hope for high usage when he's in with the second unit, or playing with the ball in his hands and getting 25 minutes perhaps, or is it just too much of a low floor with him?
No, it's not the craziest idea, right? But I also don't. So what did he play? 23 minutes in that game? So let's just take a look at it, and then we'll move on. He played 23 minutes against Utah. They lost by quite a wide margin. And Burke. So Burke got 3 minutes of mop-up duty. Like, that's factual. Out there with Brokoff and Justin Jackson and a few other members from the bench. I'm guessing, had this game been competitive, Burke probably plays 20. So, take it for what it's worth. It's also possible that, Carlisle rewards him with more minutes after having a really strong game, especially given that, Tim Hardaway, I think he had a decent game. Let me see here. Hardaway had 21 points, yeah, but he really hasn't been that great. He's been okay, but not spectacular. And really, Burke doesn't need to steal minutes from him. So I guess it comes down to what do we expect to see from Jalen Brunson? He played 25 minutes there. And it looks like, yeah, Brunson and Burke. Yeah, okay. So basically, Brunson and Burke just directly replaced each other in this game. Yep,
Oh, okay.
directly replaced each other. So I think a lot of it depends on what type of run Brunson gets.
All right, let's move to shooting guard, where obviously a lot of this discussion spills over as you have the MPE on DraftKings, which we use as our jumping off point here on the DFS Early Bird, presented by Awesemo.com. We have Steph Curry, Devin Booker, Harden. We're sort of leaving off this slate, but obviously if he's said to be healthy and playing a full allotment of minutes at 11-4, it doesn't seem that crazy a play against Atlanta at home. DeRozan is at 8-5. You have D. Russell here as well. Jimmy Butler is 7-1. Klay Thompson is 6,700. Then we have Buddy Hield down here at 6,600. Some of the similar names that we talked about point guard, but I guess looking at DeRozan, a Butler, a Klay Thompson, anybody stand out at the top end of shooting guard?
Yeah, it's not terrible. A couple of value plays that we'll talk about in a second too. But I think the one guy that you have to look at, and is it at the top? No, not necessarily, but Khris Middleton's at 6,300. That's pretty appealing, assuming there's no Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, that's a pretty big deal if Giannis sits in this one and he's doubtful to play. So there's really no reason to believe that, unless you see him get upgraded to questionable, then I would assume that he's going to play. But if he doesn't, things will open up for Middleton, as they always do. We've seen that quite often. It doesn't always mean that he has huge games when Giannis is out.
Right.
But you're also not paying $8K for him. You're not even paying $7K for him. You're paying $6,300 for him against the Chicago Bulls. I mean, yeah, look, a $7K on FanDuel. Otto Porter, decent defensive player, but overall, you're not worried about this team. And it's possible that Otto Porter doesn't even play. So there's that as well. Cleveland, though, defensively, not a good defensive team. We all know that. Even over the last month, they still rank, bottom 7 in basketball. They don't play at an elevated pace, but not something I'm terribly concerned about either, because efficiency allowed is really high. So with Giannis off the court this year, Middleton leads the team with a 31.5% usage rate. You have to love that. 21% assist rate, really solid for a wing player. 12% rebounding, also really solid. 1.34 fantasy points per minute, also very solid. Yeah, I really do like that, as should you. Eric Bledsoe with Giannis off the court this year, 27% usage, 36% assist rate, 10.5% rebounding rate, and 1.52 fantasy points per minute. Whew, those are awesome numbers, man. Awesome numbers. About 1,000 minutes for both of them, 600 actually for Middleton. So yeah, those are two guys that have got to be squarely on our radar. And it's funny, Middleton's cheaper than Bledsoe. He has been a bunch this year, and I think it makes sense. I have no problem with it. So he's not, super expensive, but I like him. We talked about Russell. He's shooting guard eligible. I don't really want to pay for DeRozan here, honestly. I guess we'll see what happens. Does Aldridge sit on the second of a back-to-back? Probably not. I mean,
Right.
He really hasn't been. I think he's missed one game this year, and that was to an injury or an illness. It could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain he's only missed one game, and that was recently. So we'll see how that affects them. And they can't really just sit back right now and take it easy. They just lost to the Knicks. That's the Knicks' first win at home since in 12 weeks.
I know you weren't watching, but apparently before Samuel L. Jackson announced an award, he actually announced live on the Oscars to Spike Lee that the Knicks had won at home. Like, he made the point to say.
Spike Lee, what a treat he is.
He's a guy. He's a guy that's a fan with a hat.
Yeah, look, he makes good movies. I'll tell you that much. But
one for best adapted screenplay. So
yeah, great. Spike Lee. Yeah, I meant to say DeMar DeRozan there. DeMar DeRozan. I'm not covering that one up. I'll tell you that much. DeRozan's probably going to get a lot of minutes again. I mean, yesterday he benefited greatly from having Aldridge off the floor in foul trouble. He played 32 minutes, had 32 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, a block, a steal. Solid effort on 22 field goal attempts. Do you want to pay that much for him? I kind of don't. You know, I'd rather play D'Angelo Russell at the same price, to be completely honest with you. Jimmy Butler, here's another one, Dan, against a dreadful New Orleans Pelicans defense. Jimmy Butler in these 2 games without Embiid has not looked very good. Usage hasn't been great, but that doesn't mean that I don't still think he's in play at 7,100. I absolutely do. This game is going to feature a ton of scoring. There's no question. There's no reason this game shouldn't. It's 238 total. So I'm willing to get to this game in more places than, just Ben Simmons. It's tough with the Pelicans, but, we talked about Elfrid Payton. There's going to be a ton of scoring, and you definitely want to have a hand in that. Josh Richardson, here's another one, Dan, with Justice Winslow expected to sit, no more Tyler Johnson. I guess with Goran Dragic being back, that should affect a few things, but he played 16 minutes last game. Boy, was that a beauty. He had shot 2 of 6, had 4 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 blocks, 0 steals, 3 personal fouls, and 3 fantasy points. So 4 points, 2 turnovers, 3 fantasy points. I mean, that's just dreadful. Clearly, he needs to work his way back.
I don't, to be honest, that's so bad it's impressive.
I know. Even if you'd been out for 2 months or whatever it was, that's awful. So even with Dragic on the floor for a little bit, are we really worried about that? I'm certainly not. I don't see any reason to concern myself with that. If anything, you have Winslow and Tyler Johnson being off the floor, Johnson being in Phoenix. That makes a bigger difference than 16 minutes from a still evidently rusty Goran Dragic. I'm not huge on playing Richardson most of the time, but I definitely think you can get to him here, no question. He'll probably play 36, 37 minutes. You're facing the Phoenix Suns, so it's a really stellar matchup. Might not be the fastest of pace, but again, efficiency matters. And the Suns are dead last in defensive rating. And by the way, if you look at their plus minus over the last month, is minus 15.5. The next worst team is -8 or -9. So, yeah, they've been really bad. Richardson, with all of those guys off the court, the numbers really aren't that good. But once again, you're not paying an exorbitant price point for him. I have no problem with Richardson against the Phoenix Suns. And then I was going to mention him at point guard, but we can mention him here. DeLon Wright's interesting to me, Dan, and really for one reason. He's getting minutes. And, Mike Conley played 30 minutes. I expect to see Conley somewhat limited, okay? He's probable. He's got knee soreness coming into this game. He is probable, but he's got knee soreness. Would you really be surprised to see Conley play, say, 30 minutes here? I mean, this last game was very competitive against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he played 30 minutes. He wasn't in foul trouble. That was not the case whatsoever. He just only played 30 minutes because why play him for more at this point? DeLon Wright played 30 minutes. 33 minutes. He played 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 minutes in the first half. And then he came in. Let's see here. Oh, you know what it was? Avery Bradley. My mistake. Avery Bradley did get in foul trouble to start the third quarter, and DeLon Wright came in and played. So it looks like he still was on pace to play. It's tough. It's tough because of Avery Bradley. You know what? I can't say. I'm gonna backpedal on that. I think I have to adjust those minutes.
Okay.
And I would expect DeLon Wright to go back to playing around 26 minutes. The Avery Bradley foul trouble certainly made a difference. Now, 26 minutes, though, 26, maybe 27, 28 minutes against the Lakers is still viable, no question. And, Avery Bradley isn't the craziest play at sub 4K either. If we expect him to get over 30 minutes again, you could do a whole lot worse than that. Keep an eye on ownership. But when you're facing off against the Lakers and you have, when you're talking about a pace-up spot, you get the Memphis Grizzlies, 96.9 possessions per 48 over the last 30 days. The Lakers, 103.6. That is huge, Dan. 7 possessions per 48 differential there. Wow. You've got to get, I think you have to get to someone here. We can talk about it more once we get to the front court, but is Conley the guy you want? I think his minutes will be limited. I'm okay with it, but I'm a little bit concerned playing only 30 minutes in a very competitive game. We're going to want to get to somebody here in really one of the best possible matchups you could draw. Not to mention, while the Lakers over the last 30 days are playing, averaging almost 104 possessions per 48, they're also 26 in defensive rating. They've been dreadful. They're also allowing the second most points per game. How do you not look at some cheap Memphis Grizzlies in such a plus matchup?
I struggle with Avery Bradley and getting him right.
Oh, we all
pretty
do,
much,
hey.
pretty much his entire NBA career. But between Holiday and Bradley and DeLon Wright, it just makes a ton of sense. And we may not hear on a Conley like we did on Anthony Davis, right? We're not going to hear, and I mean it. The phrase or 2 words load management need to go away in NBA lexicon. It's just stop. It's rest, but you can't call it rest anymore because there are rules specifically about rest.
Right.
So we get this like euphemism about resting, which is called load management, which is a euphemism for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, guys.
A wild thing, isn't it?
Anyway, we have small forward to go to next, but I do agree Memphis, even on an 11-game slate, it's intriguing to see where it all breaks out, especially if Harden, Embiid, we know Embiid's out, and Giannis are all out. It's going to be a very intriguing build here. Like, it's going to be a very interesting way to go about it.
Wait till we get to Joe Val, right? Like Jonas Valančiūnas last game played almost 30 minutes.
Right.
Played almost 30 minutes. And yeah, his price is up there, but how many years have I been saying this on the podcast with you? If Valančiūnas was a 30-minute per game guy, right, he'd be a 8.5, 9K player easily.
Yep.
For fantasy purposes. I'm not saying he helps your team,
right,
but I'm saying from a fantasy sense, there's no question that Joe Val would be a 9K guy because just on a per minute basis alone, he's just a stud. I mean, this year, and he wasn't even getting almost 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. He's a stud from a fantasy standpoint.
We'll get to that in just a moment. We'll talk small forward, power forward, then center. We do have up next small forward where LeBron is 11-2. We know we're in activation mode with LeBron, so we can take that for what it's worth. It is against the same Memphis Grizzlies we were just talking about. It's a game on the road. Haven't looked at the line as of yet, but we'll take a look at that momentarily. You have Giannis at 11K flat. Assume he is out. I don't see why he plays here in a game at Chicago.
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to assume he's out.
Durant is 9-4. Doncic has the Q tag with that ankle. DeRozan, Ben Simmons. You have Butler and Harris, or similarly, you have all these 76ers in a row at small forward. You have 8K for Ben Simmons, Butler at 7-1, and Tobias Harris at 6,800. Gallinari is at 65. Middleton, you've talked a bit about already at 6,300. Wiggins at 6,300 as well. Is this a LeBron game simply because everyone else is out, or do you think this is a good matchup? How do you rate LeBron? Then we can move on to the rest of small forward.
It's funny. You're still seeing some Herculean-like numbers from LeBron James, right? Since returning from his injury, he has still been very, very good. However, LeBron James is not helping his team win. I talked about this on Awesemo Radio on Sirius XM. I opened the show with it today, Sunday.
Yeah, we can be honest about that.
Yeah, exactly. How LeBron talked about like activating that next gear or whatever it was, right, Dan.
When his powers combined, he's Captain Planet. Is basically what it comes down to.
Sure. Yes. Well, you and I both said we've seen this before, and in the past, it's it's worked.
Right.
Like in the past, there's no question that LeBron James, when he kicks it into that high gear, he's been amazing. But while he's still like, okay, so over his last 7 games since returning from injury, he is. I'd have to pull it up. I thought I did, but I got it wrong. He was averaging a triple-double or close to it, right? And he's still really good, but the team's not winning. Like, dude, they lost on the road. They lost to the Davis-less Pelicans by 13 points. They beat Houston, but then they lose to Atlanta in Atlanta. Ridiculous. They get blown out by Philly. They beat Boston, and then they lose by 42 points to the Pacers. It has not been pretty at all. And even if he's activating that high gear, I don't think high gear for LeBron is the same gear that it was last year or the year before. He could still put up crazy numbers, no question. But against Memphis, do I need to go there? I don't think you do. I think the biggest point here, Dan, is I'm not just going to – like if Harden's out and like you said, Giannis and Embiid is out, wow, you're right, by the way. That's kind of wild that most of the high-priced guys are out. Towns is expected back. And a good matchup against the Kings. But assuming all of them are out, I'm not forcing LeBron in just because he's a high-priced player, right? Like you still have some really good 9K, 8K, mid 7K, high 7K range guys that I think you can make some phenomenal lineups around. If value opens up, like great value, like Saturday and Friday, then sure, because the opportunity cost is so much lower than it would have been, just given that, okay, maybe LeBron doesn't have his best game, but if he still has 58 fantasy points and you're playing these 38K guys that are dropping 35, 40 fantasy points, it's not as big of a deal because it would still be better than playing, an 8K guy and a 7K guy, or an 8K guy and a 6K guy when you're playing, 11K LeBron and a 3K guy or 3,500 player. That makes sense to you, right?
It does.
No? Yes? Okay.
No, it does. Totally. And I think here's the thing.
But it depends on what value opens up is what I'm
exactly
saying.
Right. That's exactly right. And I think we talked a bit about Memphis already, but that's not going to be it. That's not going to be all we're going to see. And we're already accelerating towards March in the NBA, which becomes even worse in April, where you start to have teams completely shut it down. But this season and what we're seeing around tanks and the way teams are playing, I think we're going to see it faster. I think it's going to be worse and worse. So value might become, especially over the next, I'll say 2 to 3 weeks, really intriguing, where you're going to have guys playing 36 minutes at 4K.
And even last week, it's been wild. I don't know how much of that is due to what you're talking about, but boy, we have seen a whole lot of that for sure. And Derek Jones is one of those guys that you could see those minutes from him. With Winslow and James Johnson both doubtful, Magruder doubtful. There's a bunch of spots that you can now soak up minutes. I mean, there's going to be value. I just don't know if it's going to be that same smash type value that we got over the weekend and on Friday.
Makes sense. Let's touch on what do you got in the high end of small forward beyond here? Is it a Middleton better at small forward than shooting guard? Do you have cheap options here? How does the rest of small forward shake out after the lineup construction discussion?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I looked into that yet, like where he's better fitted. I don't necessarily know, but I talking about Middleton, by the way, but with Tobias Harris, I'd mentioned on, was it Wednesday? Wednesday or Friday or Thursday, whatever, the game against Miami. I really did think that he was your best option of these 3 guys because the price point was so favorable. And this was kind of an emphasis that I was trying to make, and I think I was right, or at least we'll find out. But I feel pretty confident in it that just looking at Jimmy Butler's numbers with Embiid off the court this year is kind of irrelevant because Tobias Harris is a big addition to this team. Instead of it being Mike Muscala or Wilson Chandler or Jonah Bolden, it's Tobias Harris, who is an extremely efficient shooter, somebody that, going to see 14, 15, 16, 17 shots in Embiid's absence throughout the stretch of these games. Is going to play 35, 36 minutes and not 27, 28 minutes, and is also a better rebounder. So that's also, He has only 1 assist since Embiid's been out, but Tobias Harris is not a bad passer. He also operates very fluently in the pick and roll, which the Sixers don't run the pick and roll frequently whatsoever because Ben Simmons can't shoot. That would have been Butler's job, but now that you have Harris, he can also do it. So I think it does take away from Butler. I don't mind Butler. I mean, this game, again, 238 totals, massive. Tobias Harris at 6,800, to me, that's perfectly reasonable. You know, his price has come up only $200 since the last time he played, since the last time they were on the slate. They played an early game on Saturday, so that doesn't really count. But 74 on FanDuel, he's power forward. I still have no problem with Tobias Harris here whatsoever. When you get into the other options, though, it's not a particularly deep position. I'd also ask you if you see anybody, but, you know, one guy who we talked about the other day, I had mentioned if Luke Kennard continues to start, then I like him because I expect him to play, 34 minutes or so. Well, he didn't start against Atlanta, played 16 minutes, right? Played 16 minutes against Atlanta in a game that they just barely won. And then he plays 33 minutes, right, the very next day on the second of a back-to-back, and these 33 minutes came off the bench. He played 17 straight minutes in the first half, and then in the second half, he played, 10, almost 17 straight minutes. This is something I'd have to look into to see if foul trouble became – no, it didn't. It was not foul trouble. It was none of that. He just got a ton of run off the bench. But it does concern me because what is Dwayne Casey thinking? I don't know. What is he going to do? I wish I had an idea of that. I don't. It's weird to see him, come off the bench 2 games, play 29 minutes, then start and play 26, then come off the bench and play 16 minutes, and then come off the bench and play 33 minutes against Miami. It's a hard one to gauge, and for that reason, because he's not a high upside guy, and this isn't exactly a pace up spot or a good matchup, probably just easier to stay away.
Yeah, the name that I'll come back to is Eric Gordon here at small forward. If Harden's out, 4,600 shooting guard, small forward, wherever you want to play him, I'm fine with. But there's not a ton on the cheap side here, unless you want to start talking about Memphis Grizzlies again. But I think there's lots of balance here that you can get to in the mid tier that can make a huge difference. Do you see anything different on Huerter here? Is he still questionable / doubtful, or has he been upgraded anywhere?
I'm still seeing him as questionable, so that's one we'll definitely have to pay attention to. Bazemore, solid game last time out. He's played 33 and 34 minutes in those games.
Up to 5,400.
Yeah, exactly. He's up to 5,400 from 42 and then 44. One thing I was actually pretty surprised by, Dan, is that on the season, he is producing 1.03 fantasy. So he's above a fantasy point per minute on the season, which is I was a little bit surprised by that. Not bad. If Huerter happens to be out, then I don't think Bazemore is. Honestly, when I was doing crunches without any cap just to see what I was getting 100% Bazemore both days. So my guess is that even though he's up to 5,400, if Huerter's out, I'll probably still get a decent amount of him. The guy that I'd mentioned on the deeper dive on the live before lock, in the deep dive as well, one guy that it was going to be super popular. I know a lot of people liked him, but I just zero interest in him. Didn't expect him to start, but even if he did, I wasn't that high on him. Is DeAndre Bembry. You could do better. I get that he's inexpensive, but you're just not getting good numbers from him. Lloyd Pierce clearly doesn't want to play him for big minutes. He would legitimately rather give Vince Carter more minutes at times. So I feel better staying away from that. But here's the thing. Taurean Prince is out, right? So that makes it a little bit trickier. So if Taurean Prince is out, well, what do we do now? And I know I'm taking a lot of time on this, and I'll wrap it up in a second, but I think it's really important to mention this. So you have no Taurean Prince, Dan, and you potentially have no Kevin Huerter.
Right.
You also have no Jeremy Lin anymore. So what do we have? We have, you have Collins, Bazemore, Dedmon, Young, and then let's assume Bembry's in the starting lineup. That's 5, right? And then Len, Adams, Spellman, Anderson, Carter. So you're still going to have 10 bodies that you can use, but how many of them are you really going to give big minutes? Anderson and Carter, I'd expect not to get a lot of run. Spellman and Len are not playing at the wing positions. Neither are Collins. Neither is Dedmon. And neither are Trae Young or Jalen Adams. So that leaves us with Bazemore. It leaves us with Bembry, and it leaves us with probably just Vince Carter, maybe Anderson at the 3, but that's not a lot of bodies. So if there ever was a time to play Bembry, I think he starts alongside Bazemore if Huerter's out. And if Huerter's out, that means that they both play 30-plus minutes, and I'd be pretty confident about that. I also mentioned Derek Jones. He should get some good run against Phoenix. And then the last one, get your opinion on this as well. Luka Doncic down to 8,800. If he plays against the Clippers, not only is it a pace-up spot, but it's a good spot offensively. I think Doncic at that price point, especially if Harden is also out, come down to 8,800, and you've got yourself a solid bargain.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with someone like Doncic is they're not going to play him on this team with what he is to the future of this team unless he can fully play. So you can't do he's coming off an ankle. Is he going to play 25? No, he's going to play his allotment of minutes. So if he is in, I'm on board there. And I think he's actually a great start to a very balanced lineup build at 8,800.
Totally agree with that. And I mean, if Harden's out, Chris Paul. But I thought you made a good point. Maybe Harden plays. The only reason Harden would play is because he's a really tough guy to say you're not playing, which leads me to believe that he might be dealing with something a little more than just, a little more than minor, not serious, but a little more than minor due to the fact that he did sit out their last game, which to me is not something you generally see from a guy like James Harden.
Right. And it was it was a specific cervical. There was a very specific diagnosis for Harden. It wasn't just like sore neck. But
okay, gotcha.
That's what, it was very they went out of their way to say it was a cervical disc something on one report I saw, which leads me to believe that they have an actual diagnosis. It's not he had a sore neck, right? Like it's not
cervical strain is what I'm saying.
Right. Like
interesting.
That starts to me say he could miss some time. I don't think out for significant, but keep him out a couple of games, win this one without him, because they should. And it just seems like when you have that specific diagnosis, something more is happening. But
yeah, I think you're right, and it's against Atlanta. Why even bother? I don't see why you'd want to do that. You mentioned Gordon, Dion Waiters too. Like those guys, I don't like playing those type of players that are entirely dependent on scoring.
Yep.
But they are down there with all the wing sideline and the forward sideline for Miami. He could get some more minutes at the 3, and he's already playing 30-plus minutes. I don't see Dragic's minutes influencing him much. Maybe because Richardson would play less at the point, but still, I don't think Dragic plays that many minutes. Not really interested in paying up here. I don't even know what there is to pay up for, but I think you'll be able to get some decent value out of the position, and I think that's where we can leave it, unless you like Karis LeVert. But
he's a good player, and thank whoever you believe in that his ankle didn't rip through his entire tendons when he went down to begin the season. But
yeah, fair point.
Pretty crazy to see.
I really thought he was done, like for at least.
How could you not?
At least the season.
How could you not? It looked terrible. Power forward up next. We talked about a number of these names already. LeBron, Giannis. You have KD. Now you have Blake, AD. Lauri Markkanen is 7,900 against Milwaukee without Giannis. Maybe that becomes a little bit more of a competitive game. Julius Randle here at 7,800. LaMarcus Aldridge at 75. Comes into the question, is he the 5 here against Brooklyn, and can we leverage that to a big game from LMA? Love is up to 6,900 on DK. Also played 26 minutes and put up 54 DraftKings points. Last time out, 32 points, shot 6 of 9 from 3-point range. So a great game for Love there. Harrell at 68. Gallinari. Bagley is up to Bagley, whatever. 6,500. I'm screwing up the American names too. What do you got here at power forward?
How did you pronounce it wrong?
I said Bagley. It's fine. It's all fine.
I mean, it is Bagley.
Right. I just corrected myself.
Oh, I thought you said it right the first time, and then
Correct. I did. I said Bagley and then went back, said Bagley and then went back to Bagley. It's fine. Everything's fine. We're going to move on.
You corrected a non-correct and corrected the non-correct. That's how we do it on the early bird. Let me tell you, you don't get that anywhere else. Anthony Davis, at this point, at least we know he's unplayable. Commenced the 70 fantasy point game. One guy that is interesting though is Kevin Love. Now, what type of minutes will he get? That's unclear. What I can tell you, though, is since returning from injury, he's played 6, then 16, then 22, then 26. If Kevin Love plays 30 minutes here, well, I think all of us have a pretty good idea of what to do. I mean, do I like the matchup against Portland's front court? No, I don't love it, but I do like a price point that's favorable. And it's not even that it's baked into the matchup. It's just that because his minutes have been down and no one's been playing him, he's got a sub 7K price point. 1.43 fantasy points this season. He's only played 8 games, but that just kind of gives you an idea that he's still a very high per minute guy, very efficient player. You know, look at his last 2 games, Dan. He has 48 points, 23 rebounds, and 86 DraftKings points in 48 minutes. If he plays 30 minutes, man, that's really tough for me to ignore. I don't know if there's something out there that said that he wouldn't. I'll look more into that before writing the deeper dive. But hell, if we're getting 30 minutes from Love and you continue to see him climb back up in his 5th game back, going 6, 16, 22, 24, maybe 30, well, I think we all have a pretty good idea of what we want to do there. And I would definitely be on board with that. Another one that's kind of intriguing is Lauri Markkanen. No Giannis, or expected to have no Giannis. Was Markkanen the one that you just said had 60-plus fan? Yeah. I missed the name, but the minutes are huge. The playing time's huge. I sound like a broken record, but man, have I been impressed with his rebounding totals. And now you got him jacking up 20-plus shots in 3 of his last 4 games. Gotta love it, man. He shoots well from beyond the arc. He gets up good shots around the basket, and he also rebounds really well. Look, I really at 7,900. Now he's definitely priced down because of the matchup, you would think. But maybe not. 7,900 regardless is a strong price for a guy that's playing 38 minutes in competitive games. I think it's pretty difficult to get away from a guy like Lauri Markkanen. And we talked about O'Quinn and Sabonis. They're not, the same value that they were before. And it sucks that Sabonis isn't really getting huge extended minutes. Actually, what we've seen from Sabonis is he is playing 27, 28. And Kyle O'Quinn is playing the other 21 or 20, which is what we saw in the last 2 games. That's what it is, and I think that's what we should have expected. But are they bad plays? No. Does Kyle O'Quinn still have immense upside here? Absolutely. He's a great per-minute guy, super efficient. I don't have any issue with that at all. And then let's talk about, for a second, Kenneth Faried started last game for Chris Paul. No, he didn't start it. Or sorry, for Harden. He didn't start at the 2, but D'Antoni threw him into the lineup, and he played 33 minutes.
Right.
Well, okay, that gets interesting, doesn't it? So Kenneth Faried starts in a lineup of Chris Paul, Eric Gordon at the 2, PJ Tucker at the 3, where he really belongs, but small ball's fine, play him at the 4. He's even played at the 5 some. Faried at the 4, and then Capella at the 5. Well, Faried had another strong game, another double-double. We know that he's a high-energy enough player that even if he's playing at the 4, he can still crash the boards. He can still make things happen. He can still get the putbacks, and he's been getting to the line a decent amount. 5,500, his price is plummeted, Dan. I'm against Atlanta, and he thrives in these pace-up spots. He's the high-energy guy you want out there. Hell, if Faried plays 30-plus minutes against Atlanta at 5,500, I mean, you can't turn that down.
6,600 over on FanDuel, but power forward eligible. So you do have the 2 there rather than having to lock him into center, which I don't think would be very viable at that price point, but could have some definite upside if he's in the starting lineup. And I would like to see him play the 2. So if that is possible, I would be a big fan of it while playing for James Harden. So Let's close it out by talking about some centers here. You have Embiid out. Towns, you made mention, is probable for Monday, come back from that concussion. Car accident on his way to New York. Blake Griffin here at 9,100. Drummond just below at 9K. DeMarcus Cousins has worked his way up to 8,000. Nurkic still below 8K at 7,900. And then I did wonder about Aldridge, whether you'd want to play him at power forward, center, or anywhere. It is a back-to-back, and it is a night in New York. Now, who knows what that means for this San Antonio squad, but there could be a lot of flu-like symptoms for the Spurs on Monday night. What do you got here at center, Dave?
All right. Yeah, I didn't mention value power forward just to rattle them off. Derek Jones talked about. Kelly Olynyk should play 28, 30 minutes. Always a roll of the dice, but he's there. Ilyasova, not nearly as favorable now that Mirotic is there, but if you need a dirt cheap punt, he's on the board as well. And keep an eye on what Mirotic's minutes are going to look like. I think that's important. If we get word that Budenholzer is not going to limit him, then Mirotic becomes a very valuable play, even if he plays off the bench. 5,400 on DraftKings be a tough one to ignore for another guy that on a per minute basis has been spectacular this season. All right. By the way, D'Antoni ran an 8-man rotation last game, Dan, with Harden out. You can't tell me you don't like to see that, because I certainly do. The less, the better, and that's how I feel. So center, Towns against Sacramento, definitely a good spot. They really struggle with quality rebounding bigs. Towns hasn't exactly been great recently, but I'm okay going back to the well here. I mean, it's a spot where he should be able to exploit. He's also had a few difficult matchups recently. Orlando defensively has been great over the past month and a half. Memphis, then Utah, Denver, who limits rebounding really well, and he still had a good game. So he's had some tough draws. There's no question. But then he's also squandered some easy ones as well. Drummond is perfectly fine here. Not huge on him, but I think he'll be low owned. Valančiūnas, man, if Joe Val plays another 30 minutes, I don't need to get back into it. Against the Lakers, even at 6,400, I'd probably take 25 minutes from Joe Val. What a phenomenal spot. Great play. Cousins has seen his price come up to a point where it's pretty unattainable. You can't get much. There's not much left there. Clint Capella, sure, he benefits from Harden being on the court, but it's not like Chris Paul isn't a perfectly capable passer, and Clint Capella is still only 7K on DraftKings, which I like quite a bit. It's quite a deep position. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. What type of minutes does Whiteside get? That's always a question. Played 31 last game, 21 the game before that. And from a tournament standpoint, against Ayton, who struggled defensively, and a bad Phoenix front court, Whiteside should have no problem eating them up in the event that he actually gets the minutes. And will he? I don't know. I wish I could tell you, but that's still unclear. And then does Joakim Noah continue to get quality run? If he does, he's been real good to us lately. I don't know if he will. It's possible that maybe he only plays 21 minutes, but last game, Ivan Rabb played 23 minutes. Joe Val played almost 30 minutes.
Yep.
And Jaren Jackson is he's expected to be out for a while. So you have that, which means that Noah, who played, how many minutes did he play last game? 24 minutes. He could do worse than that. I mean, he's been a monster on a per minute basis, and I don't think that's a crazy play at all. As expected, we're going to get plenty of opportunity at the center position.
I'm going to have way too much Hassan Whiteside on the slate.
Yeah, I don't ever try and go super overweight, but if I don't think you need to have way too much. That's the interesting thing, because think about it. 11 game slate, deep center position. You could have 20% Whiteside and still be way above the field, I would assume.
Sure. Yeah, his ownership, 6,600 is a low price point on him for this matchup, I think. But I think you're right on this slate. If you're playing 150 or even 20 or 40, whatever mass multi-entry you're in, you don't have to go too crazy with ownership to cover the field. I'll be playing my 2 or 3 lineups, and I'll probably have him in 2 of 3. So that will be awesome. But it's better than playing spring training DFS. That's for damn sure. Let's close it out as we always do here on the podcast by asking, and obviously there are giant question marks here with Harden And Giannis, Embiid's already out. Karl-Anthony Towns should be in. But I'm going to go 9K or above just to make this interesting. You get Harden, we're going to say is out. So let's go LeBron, Cat, KD, Steph Curry, Lillard, Griffin, Drummond. Who are you starting your lineup build with?
All right. We'll start it with, assuming Harden's out, I guess we'll start it with Towns. But I don't.
Question mark?
Yeah, I do like Towns a lot, but I don't think you need to go there.
Right. I mean, it's Chris Paul, I assume, is up there. Doncic, if he's in. Like, these are all sub 9K guys. If you had to pick one guy across any price point, who's your, as of right now, and you don't hold Dave to this, you get his right up, which is the deep dive, and then you get him on the deeper dive at 5 p.m. If you had to look across all price points now, not that it means much, but who's the name that stands out the most as a guy you think you'll have the most exposure to?
If Harden's out, Chris Paul, Bledsoe and Middleton, just so much opens up because of that. And Jonas Valančiūnas, man. Valančiūnas has got to be towards the top of that list. There's just way too much upside in him, even at 6,400. It'll be tough to get away from. And we'll see what goes on with Atlanta. If Herter's out, you might be forced to look at a Bembry, even though I'm not huge on it, get upwards of 30 minutes. So there's just a few names thrown in there that we can get started with. But we're still waiting on news, Dan. And we have to preface everything with this news is of the utmost importance.
All right, let's close it out with that. You find Dave on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. You find myself at Dan Strafford. Of course, it's at Osmo_com for the website that sponsors this podcast, which is known as the DFS Early Bird, presented by Osmo.com. You get Emac and Adam tomorrow. You get Adam and myself on Wednesday, Dave and Emac on Thursday, and then Dave and myself on Friday morning. Emac and Adam closed out Saturday morning. We're with you every day but Sunday. So, with that said, wish you the best of luck in Monday's slate. You've been listening to the DFS Early Bird presented by Osmo.com.